Welcome to week one of athletic development across the lifespan. Today's webinar is a brief review or a brief discussion, just going over a number of the models that we'll come across over the next 12 weeks. It's very important. It's just an introduction into them. So we shall commence with our wonderful webinar. Once again, I'm Trevor. Don't forget that if you do have issues or any problems, feel free to give me a call at any time, guys. Okay, so we're going to go up onto here, and we should be sharing the screen. Well, here we go anyway. So our general overview, of course, for this subject is, first of all, to define athletic development. We're going to look at a couple of different models that have been proposed and have been adopted throughout the sporting community. We're going to look at the various stages of this development process and how we apply those. We're going to look at the implications for stakeholders. Now, again, when we look at stakeholders, we're referring to sporting clubs, athletes, parents, coaches, support staff, community, not just investors in the actual sport. How we can coach and in dealing with particular ages, and what sort of influences from sports science identification and planning we can apply to when we are coaching or an athlete ourselves. So the critical question, of course, is who is responsible in developing and delivering development. Of course, if you're in groups of 3 to 5, you'd be able to work this out and have a little chat. But generally, just have a quick think, and if you do look at it, you're probably coming across people's, of course, the athletes themselves. But more importantly, we've now got our coaches, not just the coaches, but our sporting bodies who actually implement plans. Most of the major sporting organisations have a national overseeing body, and they generally provide the development program and the training and coaching that they want juniors all the way through. So they're the main ones investing. Of course, our sports science community and our universities who conduct research and that to find out what is the most effective way to deal with an athlete at a particular age. Of course, parents as well. Parents have to have an understanding of it. Otherwise, we get the pushy parent or the not so pushy parent. And from both sides of the spectrums, at what age do they need a child need to apply general participation or skill development? And is their sport early specialisation or generally specialisation? Athletic development. Development is systematic and successive, specific stages within this development scan, and they're generally based around biological development, critical periods or windows of opportunity. These are areas where people are most tuned to develop certain skills or psychological ability, mental, physical capacity. So to put it to you along these lines, when children are young, their cardiorespiratory system is still developing, and because it's still developing, they're unable to fully compete in an endurance type manner. Because they're going to have lower VO2 max, lower aerobic capacity because they're still developing. So we have to be aware of what they're capable of, physically speaking. And also we'll look at whether or not there's a ceiling or a limit to potential. As I said, if you wanted to be a basketball player and you're 5'2", you probably needed to pick taller parents. So, you know, sometimes you are born to be a particular athlete. How much can we improve on that? And to what extent can we develop that? And also what sort of structure and observable changes are we going to see across the lifespan, and how we accommodate for each of those. Now, development theories and models, they should consist of a number of components. Primarily, they're going to changes in behaviour, and we're talking about, and if you are exposed to children, you'll see at various ages how they do develop and how they do change, whether they be a younger brother, a cousin, next door neighbour. Especially in those first 7 to 8 years of life, it's probably when most changes really occur. If you see a small kid at 3 and you don't see him for 6 months, the changes that occur both in their physical capacity, in their intellectual capacity, and in their psychological capacity all will change, and it'll be big steps. But then also, what these changes mean when we apply it to scope coaching and developing, and quite often how we can modify various things to optimise the development. So we've got a traditional model. Here it is. It starts at the bottom. As most things do, we've got our physical education starts at the bottom. That's developing, exposing them. Then we get into school sports, sports club, regional, national, elite. And it looks pretty good about identifying, delivering the elite. Unfortunately, with this traditional model, if you didn't fall in the elite or the national or even at the regional, there was not much before it. So if you were in physical education, being exposed to some, but you didn't compete in school sport, perhaps it was because your school or a school doesn't promote a particular sport that you're interested in, there's no opportunity for you to develop or go from there. So it caters for, the 1%, not for the greater band. So they found that with this traditional model that there was a lot of people who were falling through the gaps. So then and this is what we come up with. So we've got exclusion of players, poor foundation level undermines the whole system. So if you don't get the exposure or the foundations early on, you're never going to actually achieve full potential. And it's talking about as people develop, but it doesn't. So if you're at the top at under 6, that's great. Then you're at the top at under 8, you're great, and you keep going. But unfortunately, if you develop and start, say, exposed to it at 8, by the time it gets to 10 and your potential is starting to show, you've already been disregarded. Presumed to be based on merit, however, various factors such as environmental and psychosocial. So, some kids develop later, I guess we could joke about it and say, oh, the mummy's boy. But, the mummy's boy from 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 would be excluded. They don't have that confidence to actually apply themselves. But then they come out of their shell, they're not as shy as what they were, and they find that they're able to develop later. But this traditional model has already excluded them. And it also, probably the biggest drawback is this, that if you're good at 8, you're going to be good at 12. And if you're rubbish at 8, you're not going to be any good when you're 12 or 14 or 15 or even up to 20. Now, of course, there are particular sports, specifically gymnastics, diving, swimming probably falls into it, which are early specialisations. But for the vast majority, we're looking at the development across the whole span. Then we come up to our long-term athletic development, and this is what you're going to base your first assignment on, or first assessment. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stages of athletic development, and it starts at the bottom, an active start, 0 to 6. We're not going to concern ourselves too much with that. It's nice to know, but it's not an essential. We're going to come in and look at fundamentals, because as teachers, as teachers or coaches, this is when we first really start having access or maybe becoming a significant stakeholder in development. And then we go up to the learning to train. So we've got these first 2 stages from 6 up until about 12. As you see, there's a slight overlap, 8 to 8, 9 to 9, roughly about that. It's about developing what we call for physical literacy, that ability. They do call it ABCs, it's agility, balance, and coordination. And it's teaching those gross motor skills. From there, and it's physical literacy and developing into active for life. So in this area, if you've got people who are just training because they want to play sport and want to have fun, want to develop those gross motor skills, they may move into physical literacy. And then they're looking at being your recreational athletes, and we want to keep them on a path of activity for life. For those that are progressing and perhaps showing a lot of passion or desire for the sport, or even natural ability, or just the ability to develop even more, they will progress up into training to train. Now, training to train is in those early teenagers, and that's when you're actually focusing on the training. In the early models, it's not so much about training, it's more about a lot of games that keep the kids interested, but have a component of basic skill development, but it's more focused on interacting in the game. Once we get to train, we start increasing the volume of training compared to playing. So they train more than what they play. And again, they may get to this in the early teens, and they may then go, oh, look, don't want to be an elite athlete. I want to go out and meet girls or boys and but they don't mind playing sport. So it's still, for them, it's more of a social, but so they'll then transfer and move along the path which is active for life, which is fine. Those that may develop even further may go into the training to compete. And this is when we start looking about our junior and national development. These are the ones who develop into representative squads, whether in schools or districts or zones, up in the regionals, perhaps, and becoming more and more serious. And they're looking to really train. The training amps up. It gets a lot more specific to quality, and the high level of the coaching increases as well. In a lot of cases, these are the young people who perhaps have been talent scouted and identified as potential high performance or professional athletes. And then we go into the training to win category, which is high performance sport. These are our Olympic athletes, our international athletes, our professional contract players of any sports. So we're going to spend a lot of time over the next 12 weeks looking at long-term athlete development, and this is a Canadian model. We've also got the development model of sport participation. It's fairly simpler. So what we have here is entry into sport, and on here, on this right side here, as we look at it, we've got our early specialisation. These are sports where you actually start training at a very young age, before school for the sports. Currently, I guess the major one that we look at would be gymnastics. Swimming and tennis are also sometimes incorporated into these. And it's a case of developing all the way, and it's about developing the elite athletes. And here we have, on this other side, we've got the age brackets here from 6 up until 18. Here we've got what they refer to as the sampling years, and there's a lot of deliberate play. And this is where kids get out there and play and try just about every sport and any sport, whether it be in the playground, on the soccer field, weekend sport, or organised sport, or just general play sport. And they're just trying, and quite often you find children is they'll gravitate to what they're good at. And then what we have is, and from there it goes, okay, let's sort of specialise, and this is where they might focus deliberately on one sport they're very good at, they have a joy in it more than the others, or they're identified as they have a basic skill level that surpasses and the opportunity is. So then they go into the specialising years, and investment years is when they really focus on developing that skill, and then they're looking to go elite performance. On the other side of it, we've got recreational. This is where, again, they're not really focused on becoming elite athletes. They're not interested in becoming professional athletes. They probably go, oh yeah, that'd be awesome, but it's not their driving force. They know that they're only getting there for the social interaction because they love playing sport, they love competing, they love their friends, spending time with their friends, not necessarily with the outset of becoming a full-time professional elite athlete. And it's about maintaining that physical activity for life. Here we have is talent development in physical education. We look at the abilities that they have, and generally they may have the physical, cognitive, interpersonal and intrapersonal, and the creativity. Then we look at the access and opportunity they have, identification, practice and provision. Here, a lot of it's genetics, resilience, self-efficacy, teachers, peer, family and social values. So here's what's really required. In fact, these are probably the biggest opportunities that come through. So they're identified. Yes, you're a Gumby. Go over there and play with the nerds. No, you've got some talent, mate. You might go a long way, getting the practice and then the provisions. Then we have the access opportunities, and that comes to their coaches. They enjoy their coach. They have a good time with their coach, and that's quite a strong mentoring relationship. But they may decide that they just want physical activity or elite sports performance. So it's a case of having access and opportunity. So it's still somewhat limited in focusing predominantly on what is available for the athlete, rather than looking at the greater good or the greater volume, more specific to individual athletes. Then we have the psychological characteristics of developing excellence, better described as a philosophy or approach rather. It's pivotal role, psychology in the development process. Think of this as quite often we talk about some players are very mature for their age. They have better coping strategies naturally. I know we used to have a thing about, kids cry over spilt milk, when they're young, but they have the social characteristics to actually be able to compete, and sometimes they need to develop this before they go into it. So again, it's more of a psychological. Psychology is not my strong point. Karen Haddad, who you probably will be exposed to over this course, She's our sports psych. I give her a hard time. I tell her it's voodoo science and she just wants to punch me. So that's okay. But it's also about negotiating the transitions from stages and the factors. So it helps the emotional and psychological well-being of the athlete and looking at what strengths they have psychologically to allow them and whether or not they have the social capacity or the psychological capacity to go that extra step. Here's our references. Feel free to get in there, have a good look. Again, there should be links on most of the pages with it. Plus our textbook, Long-Term Athletic Development, they should be accessed via the library, especially for e-access. Okay, guys. Thanks again for tuning on, clipping on. Again, send me an email. I'd like to hear an email from you every week just saying, yes, Trevor, I'm here. I haven't fallen off the planet just yet. Okay. Yes, and hopefully we'll be talking to you all this week sometime. Good luck, guys. And we'll see you out in cyberspace.